Hello and welcome to the Every Brain is Different podcast. I'm Samantha Foote here with your Friday Five, and today we are going to be talking about managing transitions. The first thing we need to do is understand what transitions are and why they can be difficult. A transition is any change from one activity to another or from one environment to another. For neurodivergent children, this change can trigger anxiety, resistance, or even meltdowns. So, how can we help those things not happen? I think the most important thing that you can do is just prepare them and plan for them. So tell your kids ahead of time what's going to happen. In 5 minutes, we're going to be doing this. Or you can start at the beginning of the day and use a visual schedule for the day and say, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. And always make it known that things might happen that are unexpected, and that's okay, and you will deal with them. But this is the plan that you're going to do and try to stick to. So you can use a visual schedule and we've talked about those before, that visual schedules, you can put pictures or you can just use words and put that in a schedule for your kid to know what you're doing that day. If they have trouble when you say, "Hey, it's time to go do this," using musical cues might help them. So you just say, when you hear this sound, it's time to transition to the next thing. That next thing is going to be this. And so when you hear that sound, or when you play that sound for your child, you can be like, okay, what does this sound mean? And then they can go to the next thing. So I think planning is the number one thing that you can do. And with that comes creating predictability. So if you have a consistent routine, your child knows what's going on. They're less likely to have anxiety and they're less likely to have resistance against what you're doing because it's routine. They know what's going to happen. They know what's coming next. And I would just have a consistent daily routine that you do if possible. It might look different in the summer. It might look different when you're in school, but just have a daily consistent routine that they stick to and understand what's going to happen. And then you can have transition objects. So introducing comfort items or transitional objects to ease anxiety during changes. For example, when you transition to a new environment, when you're going to the car, you can say, "Oh, you can take your stuffed animal to the car with us," because you might be going to the doctor's office or someplace that's scary for them. So you can bring a comfort item along to help ease that transition into the next thing. The next thing that might help is countdowns, using countdowns or timers to indicate when a transition will occur. And so you can have a visual timer or just a timer on your phone that goes off and lets them know when it's time to transition to the next thing. And then the third thing that you can do is positive reinforcement and encouragement. You can have reward systems, so implementing a reward system for a successful transition. If they have a transition during the day that's especially hard for them, you can say, okay, if you do this transition 5 days in a row and you do it without having maladaptive behavior, then we can get you a Lego set or get some small thing. Just have some positive reinforcement there for them. And then offering verbal praise and positive reinforcement during and after these transitions can also be very helpful. The next thing is sensory consideration. So consider a sensory break, allowing for sensory breaks before or after transitions. If you know that they're going into a transition or into an activity that's hard for them and they need a focus and they're sensory seekers, definitely have them take a sensory break and do some motor movements, do some heavy work, different things like that. If they're a sensory avoider, make sure that they're ready to go before they go into any social interactions or where there might be a lot of sensory stimuli that they need to be calm going into it so that they don't get completely overwhelmed when they're there. And then environmental adjustments. Make adjustments to the environment to minimize sensory overload during transitions. If, for example, that the environment's going to be very loud and your child doesn't do well in loud environments, then give them some noise canceling headphones. The next thing and the last thing is supportive communication. Using clear, concise language when explaining transitions is very helpful. Most autistic kids are very literal. And so when you're using clear and concise language, it helps them understand what you're saying. And then listen and validate. Listen to concerns and validate feelings about transitions. You can say, I understand you don't want to transition. I understand you don't want to end what you're doing right now and transition to a new activity, but this is what we need to do. This is what we talked about before. This is what we're going to do. All those different things. And then don't lose your cool when they become dysregulated. You need to stay regulated and validate their feelings and listen and just say, this is what we need to do. I understand you're upset, but if you start to become dysregulated, it will only make them more dysregulated and then nobody wins. So the key strategies for managing transitions include preparation and planning, creating predictability, positive reinforcement and encouragement, sensory considerations, and supportive communication. If you have any questions about how to manage transitions or you're struggling with managing transitions, definitely let me know and I'd be more than happy to help you. You can go to everybrainisdifferent.com and send me an email there or send me a message. You can also join the neurodivergent parenting community where you get access to me on Voxer or through group meetings. And then there's other resources there also. And that can be found at everybrainisdifferent.com. I hope you have a great week and we'll see you next week.